Research Day. We're going to move now into our final plenary panel, which is our closing plenary. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again for the PowerPoint. Our closing panel is on the topic of how to better support participation in our community of autistic people. And I'm very happy to introduce Delphine Lebay, Assistant Professor in the Disability and Human Development Department at the University of Illinois at Chicago at UIC. Following the presentation, Lindsay Shea will serve as moderator. Lindsay directs the Policy and Analytics Center at the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute at Drexel University. And Dina Gassner, who we heard earlier, adjunct professor at Towson University and AIRP Autistic Researcher Review Board member, will respond to the presentation. And then again, the floor will be open for questions from the audience. Thank you so much, Delphine, for being here. I'm happy to advance your slides for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all the really great presentation. I really appreciate the last one, especially. I'm pretending I'm doing CVPR, and I really love those questions that were raised. So yeah, if you don't mind going to the next slide. But that's a picture of me doing my favorite activity, which is enjoying the outdoor, and that will fit with my presentation, as you will see. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about me and my research. I am a community psychologist from background, so I did my PhD in Montreal. This is the little accent you are hearing right now. And my research has been focusing on the interaction between the person and its environment and how it affects health and well-being. And I'm mostly focused normally on urban accessibility, transport, assistive technology, but there's also a big part of my research that is about community-based research in health promotion, especially in adaptive leisure, and that will be the main core of my presentation. And what do you see here in my slides is also the model of Bronfenbrenner, the social ecological model theory of development, which is a model that I'm using in most of my research, and why I find this model interesting. And I think that was really well reflected in all the presentation today, is that we cannot conceive the health or well-being of an individual without looking or also being interested in all the interaction that he has with his environment. And those interactions are multi-level, and they involve environment in which they interact closely, like their school, their work, but also other different systems or different environments, and even as far as the values of attitudes and ideologies of the culture. And I think the presentation about how academic has their own culture, and it has an impact on how we interact with each other, and impact also autistic individuals. So I just wanted to put that in, because I think that's gonna being transparent, or being the thread of my research, is that my interest on that interaction between the person and its environment. Next slide, please. So when we talk about health promotion, and it's probably something you all know, and it's really related to the nods on lifestyle intervention, but we really talk about how do we enable people to increase their control over and improve their own health. So that's really looking at how the person can have a better output or a better outcome in their health, and how they can do some behaviors, or there could be some change in the environment that will support that health. And I think this is, again, what I wanted to highlight, is how it's beyond individual behavior. Those are important, but it includes so much of social and environmental intervention and factors that are important to consider. Also, how it is, health promotion is kind of now being identified as one of the stronger way to prevent chronic disease and address other kind of disease. And I think people with disabilities, and that include autistic people, they often have to manage different kind of chronic condition on top of their different disabilities or limitation. So focusing on health promotion could be really great there. And also, I'm coming, as I mentioned, from community psychology, but I'm also a positive psychology. So I'm interested in looking at how people are doing better, instead of focusing at maybe what's going less well. So health promotion is another way of looking how we can improve the environments, how we can improve the conditions of people to achieve their optimal health, if you want. Next slide. And you're probably all aware of that, why health promotion is important for people with disabilities, so I won't talk about that too much, but I think one of the important things is that we all know that people with disability, including autistic individuals, they experience higher health disparities than the rest of the population, higher rate of chronic condition, especially in terms of mental health if we think of autistic individuals, but also diabetes, asthma, those are just example here, and also higher incidence of health risk behaviors, how we talk about that, such as obesity, smoking, and physical inactivity. And often this is not related to the person not wanting or not being able to do it, but also other factors in their environment that are limiting their opportunity to make those behaviors that would improve their health. And also we know that people with disability and autistic individuals are underserved population in healthcare, and they are also, if they are served, we often don't talk with them about those health behaviors and the different activities or services that are offered and that can support their health. Next slide, please. So what are those different health promotion behaviors? And we are aware of all of that. This is something we are hearing everywhere. But the importance of being active, of eating healthy foods, staying in touch with family and friends, having that social dimension. And if you don't mind clicking, there's a little animation there. So I'm going to focus today more on about being physically active. Next slide, please. So what is physical activity? When we think about physical activity, what is it? So it's not necessarily exercise, not necessarily sports. It's really like the broader term that encompasses all of this. And it's really like any movement that you're doing that will produce an energy expenditure. And it could be done during leisure time, but it can also be walking to commute, and it can also be part of the person work. So physical activity is supposed to really englobe all those different kind of activities of movement that you're doing. And it's been shown that both moderate and rigorous activities improve health, but more and more we're also talking about, and the World Health Organization has changed their guidelines regarding that, because we're talking more about just not having sedentary behavior. So just moving, just standing. And I think we've been in front of our Zoom for quite long hours right now, and it would probably be good at the end that we just stand and we moved, and that's something that we are realizing that also have an increase on health, but research is starting on that matter, especially when we think about people with disability. We don't know much about that, but just the importance of those different kind of activities and movement. Next one, please. So this is just to highlight how physical activity has been identified as a right for people with disability as part of the Convention of the Rights of People with Disability. And it has its full article, the Article 30, that focuses exclusively on that and talks about having access not only to doing the activity, but also being a spectator of the activity, being involved in decision making, in the leadership in physical activity. And this is something I think that will impact how and when and where the services and activities will be offered. And also having the new guidelines here of the World Health Organization, if you are aware, that are finally including people with disabilities and children and elderly in their recommendation, who were in the previous version really just for able-bodied from 18 to 30. They had the children, but they were not considering the different variety of abilities that people can have. Next slide, please. So we know that inactivity is more prevalent among adults with any kind of disability. This is this is why it's important to look at it and to study it. We had different presentation today that was focusing about that. And it's 40.1% of people with intellectual disability, which include autistic people. Those are numbers from the last national survey, so around 2016. But still, those numbers have been said to still be around those 40%. And what's interesting is that inactive adults who live with disability are 50% more likely to report a chronic disease. So it's kind of like also the cause, but also the effect. So chronic condition can impact the ability to do physical activity, but also impact how those person will develop maybe some more chronic condition because they're not able to do their physical activity. In adolescent with autistic adolescent, this is even higher. It's 60% of them that are less likely to participate in physical activity, and they also are less likely to be part of sports team, and for different reasons. We're gonna look at those barriers of why people might not be participating. And also it's interesting now, it's the link with the healthcare professional, as I was mentioning, is there was a survey with people with different kind of disability, including intellectual disability, and even if they have met with a doctor in the past 12 months or a health professional, more than half of the people mentioned that they didn't receive any recommendation, were not asked any question about their physical activity. So it also shows how in the culture or the healthcare culture, we don't necessarily picture people with disability and autistic individual as people that want and do and are seeking physical activities, and that's important for their health. Next slide, please. So those are just a slide to talk about the different barriers that exist regarding participation in physical activity. Like general, when you think about individual, and I'm pretty sure you know all of that, but there's the individual characteristics that could be physical or mental conditions that are related or not to the disability. That could be fatigue induced by medication or not, or by the disability, motivation, having a bad experience in the past is a predictor of not wanting to participate in physical activity, for example. We know that there's interpersonal barriers, the family support, the parent perceptions. With autistic children, the perception of parents are particularly important. And often in research, we focus a lot on children with autistic children, but in the adults, there's also important component where people around them, if they don't perceive them as being able to take part in physical activity, that will represent a barrier. The healthcare system, like I was mentioning, access to leisure-related rehabilitation, recommendation by a health professional. There's also social barriers, stigma, social attitudes. There's also things that are related to program of physical activity themselves, availabilities of program, the type of activities, is it integrated, is it adapted, and what are the knowledge of the staff and things like that. And in terms of environment in general, we can think about accessibility, but not only of the facilities themselves that offer physical activities, but we often forget that the accessibility of parks, the accessibility of the transport, the fact that a neighborhood is safe to walk around. We know, for example, that as a large proportion, or at least a good proportion of children with autism are living in a neighborhood that are from low income and from Black or brown communities who unfortunately experience more violence often in their neighborhood. So that has a direct impact on their ability to participate in physical activity. So next slide, please. So that was a long introduction to my research. I wanted to present a little bit more what I'm doing. So, and I just want to acknowledge that the research has been focusing a lot on intervention, target intervention that have been developed, exercise program, sports program for person with autistic individuals or person with different kind of disability. In my research, I really decided to focus more on what's offered in the community. What are those programs of recreation and leisure that promote physical activities but hasn't been created by researcher or by healthcare provider or by rehab center. So this is just the context of my research. Next slide, please. So why it's important, according to research, and also why I decided to focus on that, because I believe that there's an aspect of sustainability. People with autism, people with different kind of disability want to have access to different kind of programs that are not necessarily specific or that will end depending of a funding of an intervention. And it really represents a powerful tool for them to increase health, well-being, and social participation. And I'll show the results of my research that really support that those benefits. It's offered in the community, so that's also like able-body who want to have access to activities in their community. And also what's interesting, and often it could be related to therapy or healthcare, but doesn't have to be. And in my research, many people have told me that despite that therapy is really useful and they know that those interventions are important, they really appreciate when they can just go do their leisure activity in the community like anybody else without any therapeutic goal. So this is also why I think community-based recreational and leisure time physical activities are important. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you or share my results of many of my studies. So I kind of create a compound of my 4 or 5 last year of research where I've been looking at different kind of community-based program. In Vancouver, Canada, and also in Chicago, where I'm from, where I'm living right now, and in the Midwest. But I think that could be applied to all the community-based program across U.S. So, and I looked at different kind of activities. I looked at those are all the image of the activities that I looked at. So, hiking, sailing, music, gardening, climbing, kayaking and paddleboarding, adaptive snow sports, so skiing or snowboarding, cycling, and this is all the different research sometimes, but the next slide please. But my research has in common that I'm using 2 kind of different conceptual frameworks. So one of them is the quality parasport participation framework, which has been developed more in parasports, so more in team sports and coaching relation, but that I applied to more community-based individual recreation. So this is a model that has been developed initially by Martin Guinness, but has been refined by Evan Sehal, who are at Queen's University in Canada. And this is a model that is looking at, instead of the quantity of participation, because it has been suggested that quantity is not that much related to health or well-being, but it's really the quality of the participation that has an impact. And so that model is proposing that there's different element of that quality that that if the program or the activities can offer those dimension, or those are benefits that people can get and will impact their health and well-being. So those are 6 dimensions that are included in the QPPF. You have autonomy, so like independence, choice, and control. Belongingness, so experiencing acceptance, respect from others, being included at an interpersonal but also a societal level. Challenge, so being challenged to push your limit but still feeling safe in your environment. Engagement, so that is close to the notion of flow, being focused, being engaged in your activity. Mastery, so although those concepts of self-efficacy, accomplishment, feeling of competence, and meaning. And the meaning can be at the personal level, so that activity has a meaning for me because that's something that I love doing, but also the social meaning, and that can be more related to show other people that they can do it, or things like that. And the other frameworks that I'm using, and I won't talk about it too much, but it's mostly that I'm looking at health and at well-being as a multidimensional concept, more in the line of Diener. So that you have a social well-being, you have personal well-being, physical well-being, you also have occupational well-being, like related to the activities you're doing, spiritual well-being. So those are all impacted by physical activity and by community-based leisure. Next slide, please. So in my different research that I'm presenting you, so it represents about 5 or 6 different studies, and if you're interested, you can reach out to me. Those have all been published. But for all those research, I mostly discuss with people with different kind of disabilities. So my research, and maybe I should have mentioned that, doesn't focus only on autistic individual, but in all the research, there was people, autistic individuals involved in the research. And I was very interested by the previous presentation, because we talked often with the parents, but we also were able to interview and discuss with autistic individuals. So it's about 200 participants total, the results that I'm presenting today, but we also talked with the staff and with volunteers to have different perspective on recreational and leisure physical activity. And my study used a mixed method cross-sectional studies most of the time, which are a mix of observation, qualitative interviews, focus groups, and surveys. So the different research, we're using different kind of methodology, but highly qualitative with a little bit of quantitative component. Next slide, please. So I just want to highlight what were the benefits that came out in all my research, in all those different studies that I'm talking about. And there's a kind of benefits that I put under the umbrella of health and well-being benefits. And those are all related to the comments about physical health. I felt stronger, people feeling that their body can do things that they were not able to do before. All the comments that were related to how they had more energy and things like that. Psychological health, that was a very strong one, something that came up in all the research about how feeling more relaxed, having challenging or helping reduce depression, and again, this is the perception of people, this is not a clinical measure, but they felt they were less depressed, they had more energy, but not in a physical sense, but really also in the psychological sense. The importance that they were feeling safe, and that really contributed for them to have that feeling of well-being. The freedom, and that I think that's an important one that I would like to also study more, but how maybe in other aspects of their life they feel confined, they feel limited, but the recreational and leisure space is a place where they really experience that freedom, and that really contributes for one of the benefits. And just having fun, just enjoying their time, really the pure pleasure of doing an activity that they enjoy, and the benefits of being outdoors. Probably aware of all the research that's been around showing how being in nature, research on green space, blue space, white space, showing how those environments have a benefits that it's different than enjoying an activity indoor. Next slide, please. The other kind of benefits that came up in all my research, and maybe I should mention that I'm using the quality parasport participation framework as a conceptual framework, but I don't use it in my questions. So this is something that came naturally out of either the surveys or the observation or the interviews in focus group. So that was coming in the language of the people that we talked with, but then we were able to tag it or to relate it to different component of the QPFF. So people talked about how they felt they could realize, they could have an accomplishment, they felt competent, they were able to succeed and progress. And I think it's important to mention, I'm talking about leisure and recreation because that feeling of mastery is not at the level of an athlete, for example. And that was important also for people that we interviewed in all my different studies, how they want to be able to experience that mastery, but they don't want to necessarily to achieve a level of elitism sports. It's really just the sake of succeeding at something that they enjoy. The importance of challenge, and that goes really well with the safety. So they felt safe enough to push their limit, and they felt that they were able to push their limit, but also that they were respected of where they wanted their limit to stop, or the boundaries of their limit. Engagement was a little bit less mentioned, but it's something that came out for some people. Autonomy was really big, and I think the most important thing was people felt that in most of those community-based activity that they participate in, they are given choice, and they have control of what and how what they want to do and how they want to do it. And for them, that's really, really important here. And also personal meaning. If sometimes there was something that they always wanted to do, or that they've been doing before and maybe stopped and were able to do it again, that was something that was really important. Next slide, please. So in terms of social benefits, and that was some of the biggest, I think for me, that came out the most and the strongest in my research are those social benefits, where physical activity is, yes, having all those health benefits, but it mostly have an impact on social well-being and how people feel they belong in their community. And how it contributes to break isolation. Here you see a picture, and sorry, I haven't been describing all the picture I have, but this picture you have on top is I'm a volunteer in different adaptive sports, and this is me with my autistic students in my ski team, and at the end of the season we do have a fun race, and we did have a team that we created, and our students were so happy, so glad and so happy to be with us in that team. So I love that picture. We were the French fries. That's what you say. We look like French. And fries is the position in skiing that we called for parallel skiing. And so how the social benefit is also how it allows for meeting new people, but also and I think that's a really important one, is the family interaction. Those activities often, because they're offered in the community, they're offered in community settings, like skiing, for example, are offered in the mountains like everybody use, that allow the rest of the family to also take part in the activity. Or the kayaking program that I was working with also allowed people to bring their friends, their family with them. So just using a regular kayaking, and then the person with disability would go with a volunteer in a more adapted kayak. So really that ability to share time with their loved ones in integrated setting was something that came up as really important in my research. And I think that's how leisure and community-based recreation allow. The importance of social meaning. This is not for everyone. Some people enjoy the visibility of being in the community, especially I think if they have a visible disability. So that might apply more to people in wheelchair, or but I heard that also from autistic individuals, that it shows the rest of the world that they can do activities like anybody else. For them, it helps bring awareness. But there's also other people that don't like that visibility and would not want to be put under the spotlight, and they just want to do their activities. So that benefit is a little bit depends of the person. And also it's a springboard for inclusion. And what I mean there is that a lot of people told me that those success that they experienced, that well-being that they had in recreation, really kind of like made them feel good and strong and able to then pursue other endeavor, being volunteer, often being involved in those community organizations. So that importance of having leadership who have different kind of disability, or being involved in different aspect of their life. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure what time we started exactly, so tell me if I'm talking too much. But I think another part of my research, and maybe that is more of the interest for all of you, is how do we support all those benefits that I just talked about? How those community organizations are doing that? And my work is moving to looking more at those strategies, a little bit of identifying what are the key ingredients that are put in place and that really allow those organizations to offer the optimal participation. Thank you, Dan. So that's what I call the foundational strategies, and that came up in my research as well. And it was also the perception here of a mix of the person who experienced the activities, but also the staff. So what do they feel, and the volunteer, what do they feel are the things that make those programs work and make people want to come. And maybe I should mention that now, that in all the case of all the programs I've been working with, they have wait lists. They are not able to provide a service with everybody that would like to take part of it. There's not enough, unfortunately, of those programs. But yeah, so this being said, the first foundational strategies, I will present them under three kind of pillar, which are the pillar identified as part of the quality of participation framework. And the first one is the social environment. So, and what came out of my research is that it's the most important one. It's the one that is the most mentioned. It's the one where most people agree that the people that are part of the programs, that are part of the environment, because those programs, as I mentioned, because they're part of the community, they're also part of a larger social environment with which they interact. And all those different aspects of the social environment are very important. So knowledge and attitudes, often it's people have more knowledge, people have an attitude of openness, of welcoming. What they want is really that everybody can enjoy what they enjoy. Often you see in here the picture of volunteers in skiing. People enjoy skiing and they want to make sure that everybody else can enjoy that same fun and freedom that they are experiencing. So that attitude is really, really important. Often people really feel that they are supported by the staff, by the volunteers, of trying new things, listening to their limits, but also, like I mentioned, being challenged, and really the people play such an important role there. And also the importance of cultivating strong relationship with the larger community. So if the organization those programs are not in a silo in their little bubble, they are part of larger communities, they're part of cities, they're part of states, they're part of neighborhood. So when there's bond between those different organizations, that really allow for a stronger feeling by the person that it can achieve all those benefits of the program. Next slide, please. In terms of program, there's also foundational strategies that has been identified. The number one, flexibility to meet individual needs. And that's what my little image here is supposed to represent, that often those programs, despite having some guidelines, the fact is that the staff often, or they have the equipment to really adapt to each individual's and their needs, and they have the time and they take the time to listen to the person, what they need to be able to achieve that. And I recently conducted a research about COVID-19 and online physical activity, and that came out as well as one of the main components, being able to adapt to your own limitation and not necessarily being told this is what you have to do with your condition, no, having a discussion, having trial and error, but really having as part of the program that flexibility. Often the participant mentioned that a lot, the people, how they focus on their strength. So instead of saying you cannot do that, it's really, okay, this is what you're able to do. How can we build with what you have and what you're able to do to allow you to enjoy your activity? Offering having diversity, offering choice, diversity in what the person want to do. I think a good example is in my research with 12 programs of skiing. They are offering Learn to Ski, very basic program, and some people stay in those programs their entire time that they participate in programming. But if some of them want to go a little bit from a racing, for example, or want to be part of groups, there are different programs that are offered or activities. There's a notion of offering adapted or integrated. So I think it's important to think about that without a choice of the people. I don't want to start that debate here. In my research, a lot of people really enjoy the adapted part, but the fact that it's in the community, there's also kind of an integrating dimension, and the importance of low cost. Next slide, please. Yeah, I've seen that. And in terms of the environment, the physical environment, specialized equipment and assistive device are central. Those equipment are expensive, so program can offer them to people where they don't have to own it by themselves. Physical accessibility of the facilities, that makes sense. The safety, this is a really challenging one, and that is, there's different dimension of like insurance, and that raised a lot of questions. If you want to discuss more about that, you can reach out to me, but that's a very important component of the physical environment. And again, that collaboration with the community, that having the transport that reach the program, having the ability to walk that last mile in a safe way to reach that program. There's different elements that are also important in the physical environment. Next slide. I'm gonna skip the barriers because I think it really reflect what have been said in the barriers in general. They were the same ones as the one we identified, and I would like just to go to the nice, thank you. And I know there's just 5 minutes left. So in terms of challenge and recommendations, what I've seen is that I think, like I mentioned, we should involve a little bit more autistic adults in research regarding leisure, including my own research where I mostly had children and their parents. The importance of offering culturally adequate activities and support racial diversity. That's a place where in adaptive leisure, there's a lot of work to do, and considering the age spectrum, and also the life course, the person from, and also older adults, and we know that people with intellectual disability are aging in our community, important to consider them and think about them in programs. The importance of digital programming and training, especially now with COVID-19, we know that it's going to probably be something that's going to be part of our world. And training healthcare and other professionals. There's different programs that exist. Here I talk about just the Health Matters program or Special Olympic online portal that really target health professionals, and changing policies and practices to support more recreational in the communities for people of all abilities. So I'm gonna stop here. Sorry if I got over time. I think we started a little bit delayed, so. Thank you very much. And I have all the reference at the end, and also if you're interested to have my publication, I'll be happy to share with anybody who would be interested.
Thank you, Delphine. That was a tremendous presentation. We have about 2 minutes left, and so I want to make sure there's time for questions, but I wanted to hit upon a few of the themes that we heard you describe in terms of health promotion, physical activity, and how we think about the benefits of your work. And so some of the key words that you nominated from your work included people feeling stronger, doing new things, freedom, safety, fun, progress, challenge. And I think those are all wonderful ways for us to think about a summary of your work. And thank you for putting it together. I'll pause here and open the floor for questions. And I will ask one if we don't have any.
Yeah, it's 3 hours in the Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, we've got a question here. Jonathan is asking if we can put the contact info slide up again. Delphine, can you, sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
Hey, no, I just want to say great presentation, and I think we have some shared and common interests, so I'd love to follow up with you at some point later.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Delphine, we have about a minute. I was wondering if you could hone in a little more specifically, and I co-lead the Health Services and Systems node, and so where you hit upon the policies and practice at the end, my ears really perked up, and I wonder if you have specific policies that you would nominate as those that should be prioritized to promote or advance health promotion.
Oh, that's, I mean, it's a little bit sad, but I would say before, Healthy People 2020, for example, included people with disability and really had like this goal of being more inclusive, as every time you develop a public health intervention, you have to think of people with disability. It has disappeared in Healthy People 2030. So I guess I would like to say, why not bring it back? And when we think about diversity and inclusion, disability should always be in our mind as well. So that will be one of my things, to think about all intervention or all development of public health promotion as inclusive, and which component needs to be there to make sure we are inclusive.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Dina, did you want to make a comment?
Well, since we're low on time, I'll just share a quick story. You know, our boys who have special needs spend a tremendous amount of time around women. And my son was graced to be the hydration consultant for his high school ice hockey team. And it was a total immersion in guy culture. And so I just want to say we had a phenomenal experience with that. And I also want to just encourage people to realize that you can still discover an interest in a physical activity in the strangest ways. We went to my 8-year-old grandson's roller skating birthday party, and my son kicked my fanny at air hockey. And I haven't played air hockey in forever. And I thought, well, I'll let him win a couple so he doesn't get discouraged. And he killed me. And so now I'm online trying to find an air hockey table because it's excellent physical activity. And he's discovered walking for exercise all on his own. So, and he's 32. So I just want to say that all of those things are very important. I'm glad you're interested in looking at adults with disabilities. So many of my friends are hikers and mountain climbers and boaters. And so I think it'd be really terrific to see some more research going forward, looking in adulthood, also at looking at why we can't have physical and occupational therapy input into therapeutic practices for adults who are not dealing with an injury. You know, many of us were part of the lost generation who never received a diagnosis until our 40. Many of us are experiencing co-occurring Ehlers-Danlos and other hypermobility conditions. And we need physical therapy and occupational therapy at the same frequency and intensity as a small child, but insurance isn't structured to provide that. So in terms of future research, I hope we can start leaning that direction. I hope that was brief enough. Thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you so much for such another wonderful presentation and discussion. I do see another question in the chat box, but I also recognize that we're a couple minutes past the hour. So I'm putting Dr. Labe's email address in the chat box for everybody. Please feel free to reach out directly. Thank you so much for being here. The ARP Research Network is certainly grateful for everyone who joined today's event as it closes out the Autism CARES 2022 series of meetings. We are going to pop forward to, of course, an evaluation slide. So if you haven't hit the link already to do an evaluation of this event, we'd love to have your feedback on what went well and what we could do better next time. Thank you so much for being here. We really wish you a wonderful end of rest of your day. Dr. Kuo, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, or maybe you've already headed off to clinic already. I'm unsure. Might have gone to clinic already. So we're just gonna close out for today's Research Day meeting, and we hope to see you all at AUCD 2022 conference in Washington, DC. Take care, everybody.